The answer is not is left hanging, or sometimes the question is not brought forth. So whatever. Anyway, here is a part that's dealing with the Ten Commandments, right? The Ten Commandments. Here they are, aerial view. We'll show you some other pictures of it, of an aerial view. And here's some two silver rods where well, whatever. Anyway, underneath of here, there is the stone tablets that were broken. Because remember, Moses came down from Sinai and he saw the Jewish people transgressing, right? And with led by the Erev Rav. Who are the Erev Rav? It says in Hebrew. They are the mixed multitude, the Gentiles who came forth with Israel when they saw all of these plagues and miracles that happened. And they saw all these miracles. They said, wow, we want to go along with them. And then when the sledding got tough, let's regress to our own form of revelry and prayer, and they started dancing, made an idol, the golden calf. The Jewish people weren't the ones that instigated that, the golden calf. It was the Gentiles. And that's why we don't take converts unless they actually really believe and not fall back and regress on their former teachings and performances. So here's the picture, right? So that is the Ten Commandments. That was put into the Holy of Holies, the area in the Bible, the area in the temple, the portable temple, where put in the portable temple, which was in the desert for 40 years, right? The Jews traveled in the desert for 40 years. And you know, a little bit here. Now here's a picture of the. Here's a picture of the Ark of the Covenant. And remember, we said that the Ten Commandments were put into this Ark, and there was a wooden Ark and a golden ark and three arks, and it's a covering. You know, one was put inside the other, and there was room for the written, dictated scroll of the 5 books of Moses, what God dictated to him, and the end of Deuteronomies, right? God dictated to him the 5 books of Moses. Now, Moses wrote 12 copies of the 5 books of Moses and gave one to each of the tribes. Gave one to each of the tribes, right? So here is the actual temple where the ark, where it was placed into the structure of the first temple, and it traveled from Shiloh to Shiloh. You know, when the Jews came out of the desert, right? They were in the desert of, you know, keep on backtracking. They were in the desert of Shur, and then they went into the desert of Sin. And then they went into the desert of Sinai, where they received the Torah on Mount Sinai, right? That's where they received the Torah on Mount Sinai. And I got so many different papers here, I'm sure you'd be interested in seeing, but in the desert, this is a picture of our heroines that are standing and living and fighting terrorists on the liberated territories that God gave us in the Bible, and they're defending that land. And it took time for Jewish people to understand their teachings, and once it became stronger, we were given more land, because so we were given more land, and eventually we'll get the entire land of Israel, which extends, by the way, to way out in the land of Syria, present day Syria, which was formulated in 1917 by England and France. So we'll see how history outplays itself, but we remember it to be a friend of. We're a friend of the Bible. We believe in the Bible. We believe in our forefathers. Here is a picture of portable sanctuary, right? And here is the holy area where the Kohen went once a year to that ark which we showed you, right? The ark of the covenant, which contains the Bible, or the Ten Commandments, right? That God gave the Jewish people. And in here there are three artifacts: the candelabra, the golden incense altar, and the showbread table. Okay, that was a portable temple, and that traveled throughout the desert for 40 years, and it moved 42 times in the 40 years. It moved 42 places, and they're enumerated in the Bible, names of the places. So the tribe of Levi took these furniture appurtenances apart, each one assigned a certain part, and the Holy of Holies was given a special chore. They were carried by hand. So there you have. There you have history in the making, right? Till today, we remember that the predictions that came about because the Jewish people transgressed. And it was our failure to live up to the commandments that our forefathers gave us, and as a result, we were brought into exile. And it says in chapter 15 in Genesis that God made a covenant with the Jewish people. He made a covenant with the Jewish people. And a deep sleep fell on Abraham, the founder, one who discovered the real God. And there was a division between the pieces where animals were slaughtered and put alongside, and a smoking furnace came down, and Abraham was in a deep sleep, and he was given this charge that you are to make a covenant with God, and that being the bris milah, circumcision of the male. That's an everlasting covenant with God, and we are to follow the precepts and follow the commandments, and you will be given the entire land of Israel. But you will go into exile. This is all written in chapter 15. But you were going into exile for 430 years, right? Your children will go into exile. And if we see that Jacob was 60 years when, Isaac was 60 years of age. Isaac is the son of Abraham. He was 60 years of age, and Isaac was 60 years of age when he gave birth to Jacob. Jacob lived, his son, 130 years until he went down to see his son Joseph, right? So that's 100. That's 130 and 60 is 190, and they served 210 years in Egypt under Joseph's tutelage. They were not assimilated. They did not allow to be assimilated. But on Joseph's death, assimilation crept in. Assimilation crept in. And, you know, during Joseph's reign, he commanded all the Gentiles to be circumcised. And the Egyptians came to Pharaoh, and he said, what kind of business is this? He said, we're not Jewish. So Pharaoh said, if Moses commanded you to do it, then you do it. Because he was the one that saved Egypt in that time, in that crisis, where there was a famine throughout the land. So you got to do it. And as a result, he had the Egyptians, he made them go through the operation of circumcision. And they had to do it. And later on, when Joseph had died and the people began to assimilate, the Egyptian says, well, now that Joseph is dead, we don't need to perform the act of circumcision. And they discontinued it. So the Jewish people say, well, listen, the Egyptians didn't do the act of circumcision, so we'll not do it also. And that's how it came, the assimilation, gradually. And that has been our greatest downfall. The fact that Jews want to go after the dominant culture and look at the Jewish culture as darkness. We see this very clear, you know, in the last generations. In Germany, where the German Jews threw off their mantle of assimilation, of Judaism, intermarried, assimilated, were active in the church. And they looked and dressed like Germans. They weren't the Eastern European black-frocked, bearded Jew. You couldn't tell them from the regular Germans. And where did Hitler and his National Socialist Party break out? And their main aim is to wipe out Jews, and he had the entire country on the bandwagon. Entire country. We're Muslim. We must kill out the Jews, man, woman, and child. And they were wiped out. There are harrowing stories of what happened, how all the torturous events that they had to go through. They were wiped out. Because it says many places. In Exodus 15:26, do the commandments and it'll be good with you, for you. Happiness, health. In Leviticus chapter 1 till, Leviticus chapter 26. Write them down, chapter 26 to 1 to 14. You'll have health, happiness, and peace. Same thing in chapter 28 in Deuteronomy. You have health, happiness, and peace. Abundance. But look at those chapters, beginning chapter 15. But if you do not adhere to the commandments and the precepts that your forefathers accepted, that you made that covenant with me, then you will suffer dire consequences. And God, in His almighty power, took away the lives of men, women, and children, infants. Because rather than see them assimilate and go through a destiny of nothingness where the soul would be destroyed, He took them up in an instant, and they earned the next world because they were killed for the fact that they were Jewish. It was a wonderful thankfulness that we owe Hashem that He did such a great chesed to our people. Because after all, this is a very fleeting world. This is a testing world. We're only here at 70, 80, 120 if you can barely walk around, right? But what happens after that? The soul departs. The soul departs. And that twilight zone between death and burial is a very significant time, because that's when the soul is separated and it sees the body going through all kinds of unfavorable conditions, and the soul has feeling, right? The soul has feelings. Yeah, the soul has feelings, and therefore he feels bad. And that's why we have a shomer, a watchman, to make sure that the body is taken care of properly, because we don't want the soul, who is hovering around, to feel bad. You say, how does the soul have feeling? Give me a break. Well, we know there are many places in the Torah the soul has feelings. Where does it say? It says over there that in chapter 20 in Deuteronomy, where the conscripts are inducted into the army, and if he has a recent bride, or he was planted a vineyard or built a house, he was not to serve in the army, because he might be killed and someone else will live with his bride, take his vineyard, take his houses, and as a result, we do not conscript that person. We do not conscript that person into the armed forces. Because why? Because his soul will feel bad that someone else has taken his bride, someone else has taken his vineyard. And the soul has feelings. The soul has feelings. And that is one place where we see that. And you say, well, what is a soul? What is a soul? The doctors have operated and they haven't come up with a soul. What is a soul? And you say, well, when you give over something to a loved one, you feel good that the loved one enjoyed the present that you gave. What is that? Is that your heart, your liver, your organ? That's your soul. A soul, S-O-U-L, into the soul world. And depending on the mark that you get here, that determines your place in the next world, where you'll be able to be with the presence of God, Shechina, we call it, where we will get a seat dependent on what we earned in this testing world, right? And look at chapter 8 in Deuteronomy, chapter 8, verse 2 and 3. I afflicted you and tested you to see what is in your heart, to see whether you kept the commandments or not. I afflicted you and tested you, tested you, to see what is in your heart, to see whether you get the commandments or not. It's the Jewish people, they're the ones that get the next world. The Jewish people are the ones that earn the next world, and the righteous of the nations. Those are the only groups that that have a place in the next world. Now, if you're a worshiper of idols or godless ideology, then unfortunately you don't get the next world. You're destroyed with those souls who never made a passing grade. Read Chaim Luzzatto in his Luzzatto, L-U-Z-A-T-T-O, Chaim Luzzatto, on the books that he has written, an Italian philosopher in the 16th century, who the Vilna Gaon said if he was alive today, he would come to the feet of Chaim Luzzatto and pray with him. He was such a rationalizing individual that knew Torah, that had such an impact on writings of explanations of Torah. Well, there's so many. Look, there's so many different places we can go. Here's another piece of the history of the Jewish people. Now, here, this is the land. This is the land that this is a better picture, because here is a picture of the area that all the 12 tribes inherited. It was given to them by inheritance, by Joshua and the Goral picking up of the lots. Here's the Jordan River, and here on the other side of the Jordan River in Transjordan, what the Incapoots in 1917 just drew arbitrary lines and said, here, this side is Jewish, the other side is Arab. Well, now they even went back on their word. This side that they're fighting on, they say it's Arab too. It's Arab land. The regulation law says it's Arab land if you can prove it, but no one has proven it in 80 years. And here on the other side of the Jordan is the tribes of 2.5 tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. And it goes all the way up to Syria. And we see that the Syrians are losing the battle. God would give us this holy land. Look, well, who cares about land? For peace, I don't give a darn about the land. I don't care about land. But this is holy land, and we see before our eyes the Syrians are killing each other. Here you have the two greatest powers in the world, and they can't stop the war of Syria killing each other. What does that mean? God is behind the whole thing. And the borders are going to be given back. Now look, in 1948, they had the first election in Israel. They have 120 seats. They have the whole discussion of how they arrive at the seats. But anyway, the point is, out of 120, 15 of those seats people voted for based on the idea of a democracy, of a theocracy, where the Bible, the Jewish Bible, is the Constitution, and the judges of the Jews are the heads of the yeshivas, the most learned and knowledgeable people in the Jewish people. That was in 1948. They had 15 seats. Some people voted voted for other parties too. In 2016 or 15, whenever the last election was in Israel, the religious parties garnered over 30 seats. In 70 years, they doubled their output. In 30 years, they doubled their output. Because now God saw that the Jewish people understood when they're getting the land, they will have people who will live there and understand the significance of it, because these 30 seats are representing over 1 million people are knowledgeable and understanding of what's happening in the land and what's happening to the promise that God gave us. Look at chapter 30 in Deuteronomy. That God will gather us from the four corners of the world. And you see it, it came to pass. They're coming from India, from China. There's a Chinese delegation there that settled there after the tribe of Manasseh went there thousands of years ago. And South America, and North America, and Canada, and North Africa. From all over the Russian Empire, Jews are coming back. And that's what it says in chapter 30, verse 6. And chapter 30, verse 7, what does it say over there? It says, those people that hate you and those enemies I will put on them the same punishments that they desire to do to you. I will put on them the same punishments that they desire to do to you. And that's what we see. We see in Syria. They're going to wipe themselves out. And who do you think will come over to that land? Maybe not so quickly until, till God didn't give us the land of Israel so quickly, because the beast of the land, it will be uninhabited, and the beast of the land will be the inhabitants. But now God sees that we are here, and we understand that God has given us the liberated territories, and there are people who will come and settle the land. There will people who will come and settle the land. And that's why he's given us the West Bank, the liberated territories of Judea and Samaria, where 90% of the Bible took place. And the Gentiles who are readers of the Bible say, well, you can't take Arab land away. Well, so much for that. Let me go on to those people don't believe. There's a lot of people don't believe in God. And there's a evil inclination, and that in Genesis 4:7 and Genesis 8:21 it says the sin crouches at the door and is desired to you. Sin crouches at the door and its desire is to you. The inclination of man is evil. Inclination, not man, but inclination of man is evil from his youth, because of the fact of evil inclination making you see incorrectly.